We made it to the end here. One game left. Ohio State, Notre Dame. We're gonna go through it, figure out how we can make some money. You guys were pretty good last week. Clayton and JMart with me, with Texas and Ohio State props, and then then the Notre Dame Penn State game. A few more points in the Notre Dame Penn State than we initially thought. All those points come in the fourth quarter. So if you had the under, that was tough. Why don't we start with that? Kind of recap, get your thoughts on the Notre Dame Penn State game, and then we'll spin it forward. So, J-Mart, what was the main takeaway coming away from Notre Dame and Penn State? Did you leave the Notre Dame game like, all right, they got a good shot here against Ohio State?
I mean, I left it just thinking they get the ball to roll their way basically every game at this point. Like, they just seem to have luck on their side. Like, that game really comes down to, and I hate blaming one play, but Drew Aller throwing a really bad interception right at the end of the game. You can sum it up to that. It was a tied game at that point. It's a mistake you can't make. It's a mistake you should know better than to make. It was a close game the entire way. I felt like Penn State held their own really well. I felt like Notre Dame fought back really well. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to just one bad interception, which is, again, you could say one bad fumble in the Georgia game, and it really swung it like that too. It's felt like Notre Dame's had that luck on their side, and they've just played a good game outside of that, not made the big mistake. That's kind of been like their trend all season, basically, since the Northern Illinois game.
Clayton, you feel the same way? I thought we nailed the receiver props for Notre Dame, but also the Great House guy. He made a lot of great plays, no pun intended there, but he was always making big plays there for Notre Dame. So I came away thinking, man, Notre Dame's offense was a little bit more dynamic than I thought. What about you?
Yeah, they definitely got more stuff going through the air than I thought they would. They didn't go to Faison, however you say his name, like we thought they did, but they still got the ball to Mitchell Evans. Obviously, great house. He balled out there. But, yeah, Penn State could just not throw the ball at all. I think if they were able to throw the ball a little bit better, it would have been a much winnable game. I'm pretty sure they didn't complete a single pass to a wide receiver in that game. So, yeah, had they just been able to do that, I think they could have won a bit comfortably, honestly. But
if you flip it, because if you flip it the other way and talk about Notre Dame's defense, there were some things that got exposed. Tyler Warren, that's what I want to ask you the most, Clayton, because you've been on him. I think you had his props like the very first time he popped on here. But Tyler Warren, he's definitely an NFL player. Was that like an anomaly, like no one can guard him basically? Or is that because Ohio State's strength is more their receivers than their tight end? So what was the takeaway from him? I don't want to say dominating the game, but Notre Dame did not have an answer for him.
Yeah, I mean, he was really the only guy they could get the ball to, which shows a lot considering, there's probably some other guys getting open that Drew Aller just didn't have the ability to hit. But I think it does speak a lot about his talent, especially with the quarterback play in that game. It just wasn't great.
Yeah, so JMart, as we spin it forward, let's stay on Notre Dame's defense. Like I just mentioned, Ohio State's got all the weapons. They're fast. Did Penn State do something that Ohio State can replicate, or is it just a completely different offense built around one guy that Ohio State doesn't really have that tight end?
I mean, I think Ohio State has more weapons that make them a little more dynamic. But that being said, Notre Dame showed that they can really shut down receiving cores. I mean, obviously, Penn State's receivers are nowhere similar to Ohio State's in terms of talent and production. But if they're able to literally blank an entire receiving room for an entire game, it should show some confidence going into a matchup against the best receivers in the nation. That being said, I think Ohio State trusts guys like G. Scott as the tight end to catch the ball, and then also Quinshon Judkins, CJ Henderson have both looked really dynamic receiving this season as well.
Yeah, so what slowed down Ohio State? I've heard some people say that it looked like Howard might have got a concussion. He was kind of out of it for the rest of the game. They took their foot off the gas a little bit. Texas made some adjustments. We're going to get to the prop bets in a second. But, J-Mart, what would be the main analysis of why Ohio State – because it started off like it feels like 2 weeks ago at this point with everything that's happening. Frankly, just in the world, everything happening. It's amazing that it's only been, just a week ago. But anyway, Ohio State was up 7-0. They're about to go up 14-0, it felt like. Then they get the personal foul with the running back. I talked about that. It was just so stupid. I hate when these guys do that. Then they don't score on that drive. And then the offense just wasn't really explosive after that. So did Texas make some adjustments? I'm trying to figure out, if Ohio State's going to be able to just put up 40 points against Oregon, because I want to take Notre Dame. It feels like defensive team, head coach, all the things that check off the box here. I know you were leading Notre Dame earlier in the week, but why did explain to me why Ohio State's offense slowed down against Texas?
I think it was mainly a personnel thing. Texas has a really good defense. Texas was able to get to Will Howard a lot quicker. I know early in the game there were some times where Howard felt like he had a lot of time in the pocket, but they made a really good return to kind of like making him feel really uncomfortable in there. Another big thing was shutting down Henderson and Judkins a good bit. They kind of took away the running ability of Ohio State, forcing more of the pressure onto Will Howard. And then the main thing was just 2 to 3 guys on Jeremiah Smith basically at all times. Once you take him out of the receiving game, Emeka Egbuka had a great game, but if you're able to take out such a big weapon, it forces Howard to look, instead of Emeka as his second option, he has to look at like G. Scott. He has to look at Tate and stuff like that. And it's just not as explosive of an offense when you force them to do that. It really just came down to like stopping them earlier, making it so they couldn't just run touchdown after touchdown after touchdown on top of them, and then kind of keeping themselves in the game and making Will Howard stay focused, attentive for 60 minutes.
Yeah, Clayton, if Texas scores there, it's a hypothetical. If they tie it up, I mean, God, they're going to a pitch on 2nd and goal, like, for the love of God. The Ravens did that earlier this year with Lamar. Even when you have Lamar, it's like, no. So if Texas go back in time for me, Texas scores. They figure out how to punch it in. It's a tie game. Do you think Ohio State still wins that game?
It's hard to say because, Texas made those adjustments, kind of was getting back in the game at that point. That was just a really bad play call right there on the one. Just run it up the gut. Your team is so talented. You're going to be able to get it on one of those downs. But, yeah, I think Texas definitely could have won it. They had the momentum going their way. But that play call really killed them.
And that's the difference, like you were saying, JMart, like Notre Dame does all the little things. If they get the ball down there like that, yeah, they're just going to punch it in. So, all right, let's go to the props. Let's I think the way I want to do it is stick with all the Ohio State guys first, and then we'll reverse the field, if you will. So, Ohio State, Will Howard's looking at 252. So some of these numbers are going to be off by a yard too. Like I've talked about this before, but I think it's fairly obvious at this point, depending exactly when you bet, where you bet, the numbers are going to be off by a couple yards. So when we're doing this, it's more like you assume if you're making a bet, it's clearing it by, a significant margin. So with that in mind, Will Howard, I'm looking at like 249 to 252, somewhere in that range. Where do you see that ending up? His passing yards, Ohio State's quarterback. Clayton, why don't you go first?
I'm not confident that he'd hit it, especially with the context saying that he'd have to clearly hit that line. Given how Notre Dame played against Penn State defensively last week. I think the key for winning this game for Notre Dame from the defensive side is going to be stopping the explosive plays. That's what Ohio State's had a lot of success with throughout the course of the playoffs. So I think if they're able to do that, especially through the air, that they'll be able to hold Will Howard under that line for sure.
All right, so if anything, you'd bet the under there. JMart, what about you?
I really hate betting on this just because we saw Gunnar Stockton go for 300 plus in one game, then saw Drew Allard literally not be able to throw to his receivers all game. So I'd lean the under just because, again, I think they'll be able to produce offense from different places. They don't really need to pass, I think, as much to win the game, but it's one of those where you see two such different outcomes against the Notre Dame defense. You kind of got to take it with a grain of salt, play safe here. It is Will Howard. He did kill those lines in the first 2 games of the college football playoff. But again, remember, Notre Dame's been really good against receivers, and then also Gunnar Stockton kind of cooked. I'd lean under just because I think he's not going to be the focal point of the offense as much. But again, it's just a lot of variability with the line.
I like it. I like the thought process. There's a lot of receivers that you can choose from. I got an opinion on 2 of them. We got Jeremiah Smith. He's looking at 82 yards. That's their best receiver. He's just amazing. He could probably be in the NFL. Is he better than the kid at Alabama, Ryan? What's the kid at Alabama's name again?
Yeah, he's
better than him. All right, so he could be in the NFL, but he's got to stay there for a couple more years. That's the way the NFL works. Emeka Egbuka is – I absolutely love him. He's probably – just watching him, he's always finding the seam. So that's the first one I like. His number's at 63. I would like the over there. Cardinal Tate's at 50. And then the other one I really like, you mentioned him earlier, is G. Scott. I didn't really know he's a tight end. I know he's big. He played the tight end spot for Ohio State.
Yeah, he's kind of a tight end more in like the Kyle Pitts ways that
Right.
he'll line up the slot a lot. That's kind of his thing. He blocks fine, but he's more like a really honestly a pretty fast tight end and
Yeah,
gets up well.
his number's 21, and the way that Warren flashed for Penn State, and the fact that the attention goes to so many other guys, those would be the two props I like after watching the game last week and just seeing Will Howard's thought process. Those are the two I like the over on both of them. I'm not going to bet the under on any Ohio State receivers, but is there one that jumps out with good value to you, Clayton, or what? Or are you just kind of staying away from all the receivers?
For me, it's really just G. Scott. I did see that line last week at 14.5. I thought that was way too low. I'm pretty sure he hit that one fairly easily. But with all the other receivers, it's kind of just variable. Carnell Tate's kind of hit or miss on if he's going to have a big game. Just given how Notre Dame's defense is playing, I wouldn't confidently bet the over on any of them, but I do think it's a very real possibility that one of them could hit it. And if I had to guess, I would probably say Igbokwe, just because I think they'll probably have Jeremiah Smith double covered at times, like you saw in the Penn State game.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think there's no reason to not double cover Jeremiah Smith here. I think his under's probably got a really good bit of value just because I think Texas showed that if you want to shut down the explosiveness, you just take him out of the game a good bit. Then if he goes under, Igbokwe most likely does go over just at that line. He'll see a lot of targets. He'll see a lot of volume, and he's really good with his volume. But my favorite is also G. Scott. I loved the line last week. I almost put it as one of mine. I ended up tailing Clayton's line for it just because he's been over, I think, 30 yards every single game of the playoffs. He's been seeing 2 to 3 receptions every single game of the playoffs. He's been a big part of the offense. And if they take Jeremiah Smith out, he kind of becomes that de facto number 2 option. I know Carnell Tate's been pretty solid, but I think they look Scott a lot of the time too. They kind of have like a 2A, 2B thing going on. And I think at 21.5, that's just ridiculous value for someone of his talent.
So we've talked about a lot of stuff. We haven't gotten to the running game yet. And Penn State ran the ball pretty effectively. It's why I like Georgia to beat Notre Dame. I thought Riley Mills, the best player on Notre Dame, front 7, him not being there really was irrelevant in the Georgia game. Notre Dame still dominated up front. Penn State won the battle up front. It didn't result in the win, but I thought they had more successful running plays than I anticipated. Judkins is at 64 and Henderson's at 64. They're both at 64. Feels like Henderson gets the ball more than Judkins. Why are the numbers the same? What's the thought process here, JMart?
Well, looking at the last game, I think there was more Judkins carries than Henderson. Henderson, I think, had the big play, but early they seem to be going to Judkins, I think, a lot more. The issue with it is that they use them so differently. It's like you don't know which guy is going to be the focal point. More often it is Henderson. And so, like, if you want to bet that line, I think there is value in those running backs. I think Henderson's probably got more of the value. He's also more explosive. He has the ability to break off a big play a little more than Judkins does. So I like his line a little more. But again, they could just decide to use Judkins today. And then, like, it does kind of add that wrinkle there that can be a little difficult to decipher.
Do you have a feel for Clayton, which running back they're going to use in this game?
Honestly, I can't say. I think you could see an explosive play from either one of them. Last week, obviously, Henderson had that huge screen pass going for like 70, 80 yards down the field. Yeah. So I could see a longest rush or longest reception pass being more valuable. But given that, they could just go either way in the run game, I wouldn't confidently bet the over on either of those lines, especially with them both being pretty equal.
I like Will Howard at 11 yards. I always feel like in the championship game, if the quarterback can, he will try to do everything he can to win the game. 11 yards feels like reasonable. But, all right, so not a lot of faith there in the Ohio State offense. Let's flip it over to Notre Dame, see where you guys end up on that. Riley Leonard is 173. 173.5 is the average that I'm seeing for Riley Leonard. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like him. It's hard to root for him when I was rooting so hard for Georgia, but I could see rooting for him, how easy it is, because he will do everything he possibly can to just keep the chains moving. Notre Dame's going to try to control this ball. If they can, they have a legitimate chance. So if you like Notre Dame, you have to like these prop bets. So we'll figure out where you where you guys are leaning as we go through it. So Riley Leonard, start with you, Clayton. 173.5. passing yards.
Yeah, I'm just not confident in that against Notre Dame. I know I'm kind of picking the under on all these picks here. I think that's kind of characteristic as to how I see the game going. I think it'll be more low scoring than Ohio State's previous games in the playoffs. But back to the focus on Riley Leonard, I'm just not confident that he can hit that through the air.
He doesn't.
I think he'll force him. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say half the field's covered. I know by downs. I was going to say they shut down half the field over there, but it felt like Texas was able to move the ball a little bit. If he doesn't hit the 173, it's hard to see the pathway for Notre Dame to be successful. Why exactly don't you think he's able to hit it? Like, is Ohio State going to get too much pressure on him, or is the secondary too tough? Combination.
Yeah, I think it is a combination of both. I think they'll control the game through the pressure just because we know how strong Notre Dame's run game can be. Then, they're going to have to bring that pressure on third down, try and make Riley Leonard run the ball. That's what he's comfortable doing, obviously. But I just, with the talent of Ohio State and how his previous performances have been, it just seems a little unaffordable.
Derek, is Notre Dame just going to try to run the ball anyway? Like, do they want him to drop back and throw the ball against Ohio State? What's the game plan, and how do you feel about 173.5?
I think they are going to try and run the ball a good bit. I mean, you saw Texas later in the game move the ball pretty well with Wisner. Once he started getting a good amount of carries, they started moving it with him pretty well. And I think they'll feel confident with guys like Love and Price, who, like Love, I think, has averaged 9 yards per carry basically this entire season. If you have a guy at that line, I know it's been against lower-level talent, but you got to trust him against a team like Ohio State. On the other side, though, I do think the passing yards do go over as well. I think that he won't be able to run as much as a lot of people expect because of Caleb Downs. I think they'll have him in kind of one of those ridiculous spy / sitting in the middle roles where he is in coverage, but he's also probably going to be the guy that is there to contain Riley Leonard a good bit. And I think he will have to sit back and pass a little more. And also, I think Mitch Evans could be kind of interesting in this game. And I think they showed an ability against Penn State to throw the ball fairly well with Greathouse. And I think they have a pretty well set up passing game for this game.
Okay, so let's go. So you like Evans over? I mean, his number is only 28. Faison, who did not get the touches last game, but got all the touches against Georgia, is 31. And then Greathouse, who got all the touches last week, is at 31. So you can probably make the argument for all of them. Sounds like you're leaning Evans and Greathouse, or where are you at this week, JMart?
I'm leaning – I don't want to go back to Faison, have him burn me, but it has felt like they've focused on one receiver every single game when they've thrown. It was Faison first time. It was Greathouse the last one. I think it could be Mitch Evans this time. I think he's the kind of guy, I know you'll have Downs out there and he will probably shadow him a little bit, but I do think that they should be able to get him involved a good bit. I know Gunnar Helm had kind of a rough day against Ohio State last time out, but I do feel like Evans should be able to get open.
Clay, what about you? You like any other receiver props? Because you don't like Leonard to get the 173, so.
Yeah, I think you've got one receiver that'll be able to do something, whether that's Evans or Greathouse. I think it's more likely to be Evans just because he's been more consistent throughout the course of the playoffs. And what'd you say his line was? Something around 40?
No, Evans, the average for him is only 31. I think at 31 and a half, potentially 32 at certain places, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely like that then. I think he can get at least 4 or 5 touches, and that's very affordable based off how many times I think he'll get the ball. When it comes to the other receivers, though, given how I think Notre Dame's going to throw the ball, especially long passes down the field against the Ohio State defense, I'm not confident in any of the other guys on the field for them.
So getting back to around the game plan, Notre Dame's got essentially a 3-pronged rushing attack. Jeremiah Love was certainly an NFL running back. He is I mean, a lot of these running backs and receivers could frankly play right away now that the NFL is so much like a college sport, just with the offenses. His number's at 75. I mean, he is – I love watching him run. It's a lot of yards. And then Jaden Price, what's he at, 49, and Leonard at 57. So pick your poison. That's essentially their offense, is trying to wear you down and then take a couple shots when it's time. The question is, can the offensive line move Ohio State? So, JMart, how do you break this down?
I like Love and I like Price a little bit, and I don't like Leonard. I think Love can cover that line. I think you should see a lot of running from him. I think it'll be a lot of carries. I don't think he's bringing any like major injury into this game, which is another important thing. But I'd really with how hard he's run every single game, I don't think that would have ended up mattering. I think we've seen teams run the ball fairly well on Ohio State, at least last week. I know Oregon struggled to do it, but if you watch that game, they didn't run in the right spots. They were kind of running straight into a just all-out rush crash by an Ohio State defense, and I think Notre Dame will be able to layer runs in a little wiser than we saw Oregon do, and I think that'll probably lead to them looking pretty good there. As for Riley Leonard, I think the blitzes will be too hot. I think he'll take too many sacks for him to be able to cover that line. Jack Sawyer will probably be in his face most of the day when he drops back to pass. I think that Love will be the guy, and then Price has been really good after contact all season. I think you'll see a lot of early contact from this Ohio State defense, and I think Price will be able to push through it pretty well too.
How do you say, Clayton?
Yeah, I think Love's going to get a lot of volume, and he has the potential to bust out for a couple long, 10-plus yard runs to where that's pretty affordable at what it's at. Like Jack was saying, I definitely think Leonard is a little suspect just because I think he'll get sacked a decent amount too. You could definitely see him breaking away on some plays, picking up a first down on a passing play with his feet. He's done it all season. But
yeah, so the sacks don't count against, but like if he starts to run and it's considered like a rush attempt, that counts against him. So it is dicey depending on how they record it.
Okay, I thought sacks were
the
sacks in college.
Yeah, no, they won't count against your actual rushing yards.
In the Natty?
I'm not 99% sure.
All season it's been against them. I know that because Gunnar Stockton had like negative 30 against Notre Dame.
Sacks. So in college football?
Yeah.
All right, let me double check it. Sacks, college football, count against rushing yards. There we go.
I remember Shadur used to put up ridiculous rushing yard games when he was getting sacked like 10 times.
You are right. So it does not count in the NFL. It counts in college. Got it. So if he does it, interesting. Okay, so there you go. Better to get it right there.
They're expecting a lot of people to not think about it with Leonard. And yeah, that's like a big thing, I think, that could bring it down.
Got it. Okay. Well, I'm glad thank you for, there you go. That's why I said 99%, because I just figured if it was the same in the NFL. But yeah, because in the NFL, it will subtract from the team's passing yards, not individual rushing yards. Okay. Wow. I wonder how many other differences there are in college football. There's not that many, but I really did not know that. So with that in mind, let's stay away from Leonard's rushing yards. That does seem dicey, like in general, to take any quarterback. I guess I take back Will Howard's as well, because if Notre Dame can get a hold of him, then that would really not work out well. So Love and then Price. If it does feel like a game where they can just ride Love, like they've been giving both of them the ball to kind of take pressure off of Love. I even heard Marcus Freeman say it helps for recruiting, to basically sell the idea that we're not going to give you the ball that much. We're going to save you for the NFL. But now, last game. Okay, so you guys are with Notre Dame. Sounds like you guys are leaning, at least JMart wants to take Notre Dame. I know you liked him earlier in the week. We'll start though with Clayton. Are you going to take Ohio State to cover the 8 points? The total's 46. What's your final prediction?
Yeah, I think this is another low-scoring one. I think we do finally have a close national championship game. It's been a few years since we've seen that. But yeah, I think it's going to be low-scoring just because I think the defenses will really control this game. Obviously, Notre Dame really talented up front. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to throw the ball on the other side of the field. That being said, I'm not sure if Ohio State can cover 8 points with it being such a low-scoring game. But I see the final score playing out something like go 24-17.
Okay, so that's not enough. That's low scoring relative, but I think that if Notre Dame runs the ball, can control the clock, can't they just do what Michigan did, or was that an anomaly? How do you are you gonna take Notre Dame, JMart?
Yeah, I not only like Notre Dame as a spread, I kind of like him outright here. I'm not obviously going to put a full unit on that, but I will be betting on it because I think you look at a team that's had everything go their way, and you can say, oh, it's luck, but when it happens every week, it's not. And they play the right way. They don't turn the ball over a lot. You've seen some bad ones from Leonard, but you haven't seen costly ones in a while. That's a big factor. They don't turn the ball over in bad spots. We've seen a lot of other teams do it. We've seen Ohio State do it. Ohio State's had bad turnovers this season that have hurt them a good bit. And I think you can see that happen again. I think Howard will get frustrated. It's a frustrating defense to play against. And he's a guy that's been running on momentum this entire time. The Texas win was big, but you could think of it as a little deflating, especially compared to the high they were riding at after the Oregon game. And I think that if they're able to demotivate Will Howard, which I expect them to do, that offense becomes a lot more stagnant. And I think Notre Dame, everyone in that program just seems just focused. It seems there's not been a lot of arrogant talk. It's not been any of that. It's just been about winning the game. I kind of like a team with that mindset that plays as gritty as they do, plays as hard-nosed defense, and runs the ball as they do. They play mistake-free football really well, and I think that's the worst possible team to have to play in a national championship.
Yeah, I just pulled up Michigan's box score just to remind myself that their quarterback was 9 for 16 for 62 yards and 2 picks. So, yeah, Notre Dame can win this game without lighting up the scoreboard if they can somehow replicate what Michigan did against Ohio State. Quick question just before we get to the NFL playoffs. So you guys are still in school. You're at that point in your life where you can hate the other SEC teams, especially your rival. Is there any argument that Ohio State fans would have rather beat Michigan and not win the national championship, or you 1,000% rather have the national championship?
I'd rather have the national championship, but from what I've seen online, I think they might rather win that game. I've seen they won't shut up about it. They're really insecure about it. They haven't won that game in forever. Right. I think you could make a legitimate argument. I don't think they'd think it out loud, but subconsciously, I do think they'd rather beat Michigan than win a national championship.
It's almost because Clayton, what I was thinking is if they win this game, then they got to hear more about the Michigan game for the next 4 months. Because now Michigan fans get to do the stupid thing. I guess we're national champions. Which if Ohio State just would have lost in the first round, then it's kind of whatever, it's over with. But any part of you rather just beat the rival? I guess the rival for you is Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, as a South Carolina fan, as with being a fan of a team that doesn't even have an SEC championship, I would much rather see the national championship. When you go from the Ohio State perspective, they've got some pretty crazy fans over there. I have seen what Jack's talking about online. I mean, they're pissed off about that. But at the end of the day, if you win the national championship, you're arguing with a Michigan fan. I won the national championship. You can't argue with that. So
yeah, it's the first year that you could lose to Michigan. Had not win the Big Ten. There's so many weird things about this year. It's also the first year. So, I mean, life's weird. What are you going to do? All right, let's do a quick, just get your thoughts on it. Any chance for the upset on Saturday? We'll put this out Saturday. So later this afternoon, we got the Chiefs -8 against the Texans, Lions -9 against the Commanders. A lot of these future prop bets are, will the Chiefs/Lions win the Super Bowl or the rest of the field? So they are the clear favorites. The Ravens and Bills have a heavyweight fight, and the Eagles and the Rams, you can poke a lot of holes in both teams. So it does feel like the Chiefs and the Lions are the big favorites. Do we get the upset? JMart, what do you think? Either way?
I think we get one. I think there will be one upset this week. I know last week was super chalk. Everyone kind of hated it. I want to see an upset. I think the Texans are capable of doing it. I don't think they will just because they're playing the Chiefs. I think if they're
not winning that game,
I think if they were playing a Bills or a Ravens, there's a chance they could make it close, somehow beat them. I think if they're even playing the Lions, they could win it. It's just that it's the Chiefs. I don't think you're beating Mahomes. He's not going to be a one-game exit kind of guy. It's just not going to happen. The Commanders can frustrate the Lions, though, and that is a spot where I can see them making some noise, making it a little uncomfortable for them. I can see them keeping it close, and then if it's close in the fourth quarter with Jaden Daniels, I mean, bets are off. I can't project what's going to happen at that point. We've seen him pull off some of the most ridiculous shit ever. Yeah. Legitimately, you were to go ask a random elementary schooler how that would go, they would have as good of a guess as I would on if you keep it close.
Yeah, the Commanders have a lot of Notre Dame in them. They're just finding ways to pull it off. A lot of good vibes. Any upsets?
And it's going to be a ballsy game, too. I just want to say that. Those are two coaches that have gone for basically every round they get. And so
I was going to say, whatever the under is for the punts, I'm sure it'll be adjusted, but bet the under for the punts in that game. Any upset for you later this afternoon, Clayton, in the Chiefs, Texans, or the Lions and the Commanders?
Not in those two games. The Texans this year in games against good teams, playoff teams, they just haven't looked as strong as they have against your average run of the mill NFL team. So I'm not confident in them, especially against the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, like Jack said, I just don't see him being a first round. Obviously they had to buy, but one game and done type of guy. When it comes to the Lions Commanders game, I think that one has a little bit more potential to be close, but even if it's a shootout situation, I just don't see the Commanders being able to keep up with the Lions there down the stretch.
Yeah, I didn't like the fact that the Bucs had so many open guys. Felt easy for the Bucs. Like all the Lions have is like more guys essentially and better guys. Washington, they have a really. The interesting thing will be if the Lions come out and throw the ball, because Washington has trouble stopping the run, but they did a pretty good job against Tampa last week. And they kind of, I don't know, the game was so weird. I don't even feel like thinking about that game. All right, Sunday, I want to like the Rams. I do like the Rams. Clayton, do you like the Rams against the Eagles?
I do. The Eagles did not look too great last week, especially through the air. They really weren't passing the ball that well. The Rams and the Eagles are both two teams this season that just kind of like snuck up on me. Like I didn't expect either of them to be, I guess, as good as they are now, especially how they started out the season. But given the Eagles' performance last week and just how dynamic the Rams' offense is, they've got a solid defense too. I've got the Rams winning that one.
Yeah, I feel like I'm all vibes here with the Rams. Like the Rams are playing as one team. They're using the tragedy to like unify, which I think you can't really understate the effect it had, at least on the Vikings. The Vikings just seemed like out of that game. Like I don't want to say they felt guilty winning the game because I know that's not what's happening, but also, yeah, it's hard when things like that happen. I still remember Katrina and then the Saints blocked the punt, and there's like an energy that is completely the opposite of the Philadelphia energy. The energy of the Eagles is just like almost comical as AJ Brown's reading self-help books. Saquon Barkley like won't pad his stats no matter what fancy people like ask him to do. It's like he just won't do it. He won't run so I don't know. I have been hate betting the Eagles for 2 months before I gave that up. And I feel like I'm right back at it now. Like everything I didn't like about the Eagles before the season is essentially what I don't like now. Just bad vibes. The coach makes me nervous. And now the Rams are coming there, and they were humiliated last time. Barkley just like ran down their throat. Feels like a different team. I know the Bills are in the same. Feels like the Bills and the Rams are in the same spot. Like we watched these games earlier this year, and the Eagles destroyed the Rams, and the Ravens destroyed the Bills. Why would it be any different? JMart, what do you think about the Eagles?
Rams still have a pretty bad run defense, and Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the NFL. And then I look at the Eagles defense. I see an elite run stopping unit that'll take Kyren Williams out of the game, similar to how the Vikings did, which was well. That's the one thing they did a good job of in that game. But the difference is the Eagles have their corners to cover pretty well with Quinion Mitchell, guys like that. Losing to Kobe Dean's a big loss. That'll hurt them a really good bit in that linebacking core. I just don't think it's enough to counter out Saquon going against a bottom 5 run defense unit in the NFL.
I think that McVay is so good on that first drive. If the Rams can get 7-0,
if they can get them, if they can make it 2 possessions quick, Sirianni will panic and then it becomes ridiculous. But the only way this swings, I think, for the Rams is if McVay legitimately, the coaching discrepancy, which is big, becomes such a big factor that it ends up Sirianni literally coaches himself out of winning this game.
JMart made me feel good JMart made me feel good this week earlier by saying he loves the Ravens. I'm finding more and more people to like the Ravens. Clayton, are you on the Ravens train, or do you think Buffalo gets them?
Yeah, I like the Ravens too. You look at them last week against the Steelers. I mean, Zay Flowers out of the game. The Steelers knew exactly what was coming, and they still ran all over them. And that's a great defense. And when you look at earlier in the season when these two teams played, I mean, it was kind of the same story. I think Derrick Henry had almost 200 yards against the Bills, and that was just an easy win for him. The Ravens are riding with the momentum right now. I do think whoever wins this game is going to the Super Bowl. I think either of these teams will beat the Chiefs or the Texans. I think it's going to be the Chiefs next round. But I think the way the Ravens offense is looking, they're going to still be able to run the ball all over the Bills, even if the Bills are expecting that to be coming.
What prop bets are we looking at in any of these games? Anything that like jumps out to you where you're like, this game's definitely gonna be low scoring, high scoring? It feels like the Lions Commanders game I hate to say something's too easy, but the only hesitancy I have with the stupid prop bets is Baker would have crushed every prop bet. Every receiver would have gone over. Except they just have 44 plays. Like the Commanders can take the air right out of the ball. The Ravens and the Bills, I imagine they're going to do the same thing. Feels like, and then the Rams prop bets would have gone over, except the Vikings can't score, so the Rams didn't have to. Is there a game that you feel really confident both teams get into the 30s, or a game where you're really confident that both teams get nowhere near the 20s? JMart, what about you?
The one bet that I will always feel confident in, as long as he's not eliminated, is Nico Collins' longest reception. I'm going to keep spamming the shit out of this line until it doesn't hit. The Chiefs have struggled a bit to defend deep, and I think Nico hit like just a month ago against the Chiefs. Until it stops working, there's no reason to stop looking at it. I do think this is a great game script for it too. Chiefs should be leading a good bit of the game. I don't think the Texans will run as many plays as they did against the Chargers, but Nico Collins only needs one. He always seems to get open deep. It's the one I like. And then also probably Jameson Williams receiving yards. I think if there's anyone to feel the most comfortable about in a game where the Lions could only run a couple plays, it would be the guy that can basically cover his yards line in one. And like you were saying, Commanders don't cover very well. And Jameson's so fast that you got to cover well if you want to keep him contained.
Yeah, I struggle to figure out how the Commanders are going to slow down Detroit. But if Detroit doesn't have the ball, then that's that. Clayton, any particular? We'll have more prop bets out. If you guys actually have them, I know putting you on the spot right this second. But anything jump out to you?
Not a prop, but I do like the Commanders-Lions game going over 55.5. I think the line's at total points. I think it'll be a shootout type of game. Obviously, the Lions have some injuries in the secondary. That one seems very realistic out of all the points lines that I've seen.
My number one betting advice for this week is if you really feel confident, like you were saying, Clayton, that the Bills or Ravens would go to the Super Bowl, definitely do the future bet right now. Get a couple of your future bets in. So that way when the Super Bowl rolls around, you feel like you're in a position to hedge, or even the following week. So I just can't talk myself into the Texans or trust me, I really want the Texans to win. That'd be great. Ravens, that'd be amazing. I would say zero is ridiculous, but a very small chance that Houston's coming here and taking the Super Bowl from us after we lost last year. And I think Buffalo would probably feel the same way, especially since Buffalo lost to Houston earlier in the year. Buffalo is desperate to get back to the Super Bowl. If Houston beats Kansas City, they're going to feel like they already won the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I hope the Texans win. I just don't see it. I don't even know what the pathway is. I guess if they spread out everybody today, and Stroud is just amazing. And, yeah, you know what? The Chiefs' tackles suck. So I guess that's one thing that the Texans could hang their hat on if they can get some pressure to them. So, but I just don't see it. And then later tonight, yeah, if you don't like the Lions to win, if you think the Commanders can win this game, you have a strong feeling on the Eagles-Rams, definitely take them now to win the NFC, because then they'll be the home favorite the following week. So, all right. Thank you, guys. If we have props, we'll get them out for the NFL and college games on Monday. So, sweet. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Have a good weekend. And I'll be here in the morning to endlessly talk about this Ravens-Bills game.